Jack Corbin sought silence. He had earned it, paid for it in sweat and blood and pieces of his soul left in places he refused to name. The mountains of northern Idaho offered a passable imitation of it. Here, the wind in the pines was the only whisper, and the cold snap of a twig underfoot was the only sudden noise. He walked the ridgeline, the crisp autumn air a clean burn in his lungs. Beside him, pacing with the easy, powerful gait of a creature born for this, was Havoc. The German Shepherd was more than a dog. He was a witness, a four-legged archive of Jack's other life, the one before the silence. Havoc had served 2 tours as a military working dog, his senses honed to detect things men could not see. Like Jack, he was retired. Like Jack, he carried ghosts. They moved as one unit, man and dog, their bond forged not in a backyard, but in the dust and chaos of war. They approached the old scar on the mountainside. The Sterling Mine. Locals said it had been empty for 50 years, a hollowed-out tooth in the granite jaw of the range. Fences sagged, warning signs were riddled with rust and buckshot. It was a place of endings. Havoc stopped. His body went rigid, a statue of coiled muscle and focused intent. His ears swiveled, locking onto something deep within the mine's dark maw. A low growl rumbled in his chest, a sound Jack had not heard since their last deployment. It was not a warning to a bear or a mountain lion. It was a combat growl. Jack put a hand on the dog's neck. "Easy, boy. What is it?" Havoc ignored him. He took a step forward, then another, his black nose twitching, deciphering a story written on the air that Jack could not read. It was a story that disturbed him. Before Jack could give the command to heal, Havoc bolted. He shot into the darkness of the mine shaft, like a black arrow fired from a bow. "Havoc!" Jack's voice was sharp, a commander's crack that had once stopped men in their tracks. The dog did not return. The darkness swallowed him whole. Silence returned, but now it was different. It was heavy, threatening. "Havoc, front!" Jack yelled, his voice echoing back from the rock thing. Jack's world narrowed to the black rectangle of the mine entrance. The peaceful hike was over. The silence he had sought was broken by an absence. His partner was in there. He felt the old switch flip inside his head. The calm, methodical coldness that had kept him alive for a decade settled over him. The retired veteran was gone. The operator was back. He unslung the small pack from his shoulders. Inside was water, a first aid kit, a length of rope, and a high-lumen flashlight. Standard hiking gear for anyone else. For him, it was a go bag. He checked the flashlight's beam, a piercing white cone that cut into the mine's oppressive gloom. He took a deep breath, the air tasting of damp earth and something else. Something metallic and wrong. He entered the mine, the light carving a path ahead. The temperature dropped instantly. Water dripped from the timber supports, each drop a tick of a clock counting down. "Havoc!" he called again, his voice lower now, controlled. He moved deeper, his boots making no sound on the packed dirt floor. His eyes scanned every shadow, every recess in the rock. He saw tracks, not just his dog's, heavy boot prints, recent. Then he heard it. A faint whimper. It was Havoc. He was hurt. Jack moved faster, rounding a bend in the tunnel. The beam of his light caught them. 2 men stood over his dog. Havoc was on the ground, favoring a leg, but he was still between them and something else. Something in the shadows behind him. One man held a heavy tire iron. The other had a pistol, held loosely at his side. They wore the jackets of a local construction company, Vance Development. Havoc was snarling, a deep, guttural sound of pure defiance. He would not back down. He was protecting something. Jack's light swept past them, illuminating what the dog was guarding. A girl. She was huddled against the rock wall, no older than 16. Her face was bruised, her clothes torn. Terror radiated from her in waves, so palpable he could almost feel it. The man with the tire iron turned, squinting into the light. "Who the hell are you? This is private property." Jack kept the beam centered on the man's face, blinding him. He did not answer the question. He asked his own, his voice flat and cold as the mine air. "What did you do to my dog?" The man laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Your mutt got what it deserved. Now get out of here before you get the same." Jack took a slow step forward. "Let the girl go. We walk out. This ends." The second man raised his pistol. "It ends with you in a hole, old man." That was the mistake, the final one they would make that day. Jack dropped his flashlight. The world plunged into absolute blackness. Before their eyes could adjust, he moved. He was a phantom in the dark, guided by sound and memory. He closed the 10 feet between them in 2 silent strides. The first man grunted as Jack's elbow struck his throat. The tire iron clattered to the ground. The second man fired the pistol. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space, the muzzle flash a brief, violent flower of orange that illuminated Jack already on him. He seized the man's wrist, twisting it with brutal efficiency. Bones snapped. The man screamed as the gun fell from his numb fingers. A single, precise strike to the temple, and the man crumpled. Total time elapsed. 4 seconds. Silence again. Jack retrieved his flashlight, the beam cutting back through the dust-filled air. Both men were on the ground, unconscious. Not dead. He did not kill unless he had to. He turned the light to his dog. Havoc limped toward him, whining softly. Jack knelt, running his hands over the dog's leg. A bad bruise, maybe a hairline fracture from a kick. He would live. "Good boy," Jack whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Good boy." Then he looked at the girl. She was staring at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and disbelief. He softened his voice. "It's okay. You're safe now." He walked over to her slowly, keeping the light pointed at the ground so as not to scare her. He knelt a few feet away. "My name is Jack. What's yours?" She hesitated, her breathing shallow and fast. "Maya." "Okay, Maya." He kept his tone even, calm. "We're going to get you out of here." He helped her to her feet. She was unsteady, leaning on him for support. With Havoc limping beside them, they walked out of the mine and back into the clean, cold light of day. The world outside seemed impossibly bright, impossibly peaceful. It was a lie. The violence from the mine had followed them out. Jack tended to Havoc's leg first, then to Maya's cuts and bruises. He gave her water and a protein bar from his pack. She ate like she had not seen food in days. She did not speak. She just watched him, her eyes tracking his every move. He sat on a log opposite her. Havoc rested his head on Jack's knee, his own eyes never leaving the girl. "They work for Elias Vance," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. Jack knew the name. Vance owned half the county. The lumber mill, the construction company, the ski resort. His face was on billboards, smiling like a benevolent king. "His son. He brought me here," she continued, her voice breaking. "He does this. To girls. Everyone knows. No one says anything." Jack looked at her bruised face, at the terror that had been etched into her features. He looked at his loyal dog, injured for defending an innocent. A cold, righteous anger began to smolder deep within him. He had tried to leave the war behind, but it had found him here, in the quiet mountains. He met her gaze. His voice was quiet, but it was a vow. This ends today. He looked her directly in the eye, and the world seemed to stop. Saka, I promise you. Later that day, a sleek black sedan rolled up the gravel road to Jack's isolated cabin. A man in an expensive suit got out. He was trim, with the predatory stillness of a high-priced lawyer. "Mr. Corbin," he began, not offering a hand. "I'm Marcus Thorne. I represent Elias Vance." Jack stood on his porch, arms crossed. Havoc lay at his feet, a low growl just audible. "I know who you are. My client understands there was a misunderstanding at the old Sterling property, a case of trespassing. He's a reasonable man. He is prepared to compensate you for the injury to your animal and for your trouble." Thorne opened a briefcase revealing stacks of $100 bills. $50,000 in exchange for your silence and your immediate departure from this county. Jack stared at the money, then back at the lawyer's smug face. He did not move. He did not speak for a long moment. The silence stretched, becoming a weapon. "There's a difference," Jack finally said, his voice dangerously soft. "You see this as a negotiation, a problem to be managed with money." He took a step forward. Thorne flinched almost imperceptibly. "I see it as a promise I made to a child." He looked past the lawyer, toward the distant mountains. "So you can take your blood money, and you can go back to your boss. You tell him I'm not leaving. You tell him I'm not for sale. You tell him this doesn't end with me being silent." He locked eyes with Thorne, the cold fire burning in their depths. "It ends with him in a cage." The lawyer's composure cracked. He snapped the briefcase shut. "You have no idea what you're starting, you foolish old man. You'll be crushed." Thorne got back in his car and sped away, leaving a cloud of dust. Jack watched him go. The lawyer was wrong. He knew exactly what he was starting. He was starting a war, and it was the only thing he had ever been truly good at. The first move was by the book. It was always by the book, at first. Jack drove Maya to the county sheriff's office in the small town of Pine Ridge. The building was old brick, with a sagging American flag out front. It was meant to project stability, safety. It felt like a facade. Sheriff Brody was a big man. His uniform stretched tight over a swelling gut. He listened to their story with a practiced, weary patience. He looked at Maya's bruises, at the limp in Havoc's walk. He nodded and sighed and made notes on a pad. "Son of Elias Vance, you say?" Brody repeated, chewing on the end of his pen. "That's a serious accusation, young lady." "It's the truth," Maya said, her voice shaking but firm. "I'll have a deputy go up to the mine. Take a look around," Brody said, his tone dismissive. "But you were trespassing on Vance property. That complicates things." Jack felt the temperature in the room drop. She was assaulted. My dog was attacked. 2 of his men are still up there, unconscious. Brody's eyes hardened. "So now you're admitting to assault yourself? See what I mean? Complicated." He closed his notepad. "We'll look into it. Go on home now. We'll be in touch." They were being dismissed. The system was not just broken, it was owned. Jack knew then that the official channels were a dead end. They were a trap, designed to frustrate and exhaust anyone who tried to use them against the town's king. The escalation began the next day. A post appeared on the town's community social media page. It was an anonymous account, painting Maya as a known troublemaker, a runaway with a history of making things up. It hinted at drugs. It mentioned a strange, reclusive veteran living up in the woods. The comments underneath were a mix of gossip and suspicion. The seeds of doubt were being sown. Then came the surveillance. A dark pickup truck, the kind used by Vance's crews, parked at the end of Jack's road for hours at a time. It made no attempt to hide. It was a message. "We are watching you." Jack watched back. He used a spotting scope from his porch, noting license plates, times, and faces. He was cataloging them, building a file. One afternoon, he returned from a supply run to find the door to his cabin unlocked. He had locked it. He drew the pistol he now carried everywhere and cleared the small house with swift, silent precision. No one was inside, but things were moved. A book was out of place. A drawer was slightly ajar. It was another message, more personal this time. "We can get to you. We can get inside." Maya was staying with him. There was nowhere else for her to go. Her family, broken and intimidated, had told her to just let it go, to not make trouble. Jack saw the fear returning to her eyes. The confidence he had tried to build was eroding under the constant pressure. "He's not going to stop, is he?" she asked one evening, watching the pickup truck at the end of the road. "No," Jack said simply. "Neither are we." The next step in the campaign was meant to be more direct. They came at night. 3 of them. They did not use the road, but came through the woods, thinking they were being stealthy. They did not account for havoc. The dog, resting on the porch, was on his feet before they cleared the tree line. He did not bark. He let out a low, menacing growl that was more terrifying than any alarm. Jack was already moving, a shotgun in his hands. He flipped on the powerful exterior floodlights he had installed. The 3 men were caught in the glare, frozen like deer. They held baseball bats. "You're on the wrong property." Jack's voice boomed from the darkened porch. One of them, emboldened by numbers, took a step forward. "Vance sends his regards." That was all the confirmation Jack needed. He racked the shotgun. The sound, a definitive mechanical chunk-chunk, echoed in the night. It was a sound that promised brutal, irreversible consequences. "Your next step is your last one," Jack said calmly. "Turn around. Walk away." The men hesitated, looking at each other. They were thugs, not soldiers. They were paid to intimidate, not to die. Faced with the cold certainty in Jack's voice and the silhouette of the shotgun, their courage evaporated. They backed away slowly, then turned and fled into the darkness. Jack watched them go, his finger resting on the trigger. He did not lower the weapon until they were long gone. He knew this was not over. This was just a test. The real assault would come, and he would not be able to face it alone. He went inside. Maya was huddled in a corner, trembling. He knelt in front of her. "They're gone. You're safe." She looked at him, tears streaming down her face. For how long? It was the right question. The intimidation was working. Fear was a poison, and it was seeping in. He knew he could not just be a shield. A shield can be broken. He had to be a sword. He made a decision. He had spent years cutting himself off from his past, from the men who knew the part of him that thrived in the darkness. Now, he needed them. He walked over to a small, secure case in his closet. Inside was a satellite phone. He had not used it in 3 years. He powered it on, waited for it to connect to a military satellite high above the earth, and dialed a number he knew by heart. It rang twice. A voice answered, crisp and professional. "Go." "Reaper, it's Ghost." There was a pause on the other end, then a small, surprised laugh. "Ghost. Thought you fell off the face of the earth. Everything good?" Jack looked over at Maya, who was now being comforted by Havoc, the dog licking the tears from her face. "No, Reaper," Jack said, his voice grim. "Everything is not good. I need to call in the team." The line went silent for a beat. Then the voice came back. All business. "Send coordinates. We're on our way." The cavalry did not arrive in helicopters or armored trucks. They arrived in a beat-up Ford Transit van that looked like it belonged to a plumber. Two men stepped out. The first was Marcus Reaper Cole, a wiry man with eyes that seemed to see everything at once. He was a ghost in the machine, a master of signals intelligence and cyber warfare. The second was David Doc Chen, broad-shouldered and calm, a former SEAL corpsman who could patch up a man with duct tape and a prayer, or take apart a room full of hostiles with terrifying speed. They greeted Jack not with handshakes, but with a simple nod of understanding. They were brothers, bound by a covenant that needed no words. They listened as Jack laid out the situation. They looked at Maya, their expressions hardening. They had fought and bled to protect innocence. Seeing her, they saw the mission. "System's dirty," Reaper stated, tapping on a ruggedized laptop he had already set up. Sheriff Brody received 3 payments from Avance Shell Corporation over the last year, labeled consulting fees. He's bought and paid for. "So we can't use the law," Doc said, cleaning a pistol on Jack's kitchen table. "That simplifies things." "We need more than just force," Jack countered. "Vance is a pillar of this community. We need to tear down the foundation. We need allies." Their first stop was the office of the Pine Ridge Chronicle, a small local newspaper run out of a dusty storefront. Sarah Jenkins had been a thorn in Elias Vance's side for years. She was a relentless investigative journalist who had been chipping away at his empire, article by article, but she never had the proof to make anything stick. She was skeptical at first, another story she could not print without a source. Then Jack put Maya in front of her. Maya told her story. All of it. The fear, the pain, the way Vance's son had laughed. Sarah listened, her pen never touching the paper. When Maya was finished, there were tears in the journalist's eyes. "I've heard whispers," Sarah said, her voice filled with a quiet fury. Other girls, families who suddenly moved away. Accidents on Vance work sites that were quickly settled. "Get us the names," Jack said. "We'll get you the proof." A partnership was formed. Sarah would dig into the paper trail. Reaper would dig into the digital one. Next, they needed a lawyer. A real one. Jack called a number provided by the Veteran Support Network. It led him to Ben Carter, a former Marine JAG officer who now ran a small pro bono practice dedicated to helping vets. He was a pit bull in a cheap suit. Ben drove up from 2 towns over, listened to the case, and a slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. "A corrupt billionaire? A bought-off sheriff? And a conspiracy of silence?" Ben said, rubbing his hands together. "It's the legal equivalent of a target-rich environment. I'm in. My services are free. Watching you guys work will be payment enough." The team was growing. The board was being set. Reaper set up a perimeter around Jack's cabin with motion sensors and thermal cameras. Doc gave Maya a burner phone with a panic button that pinged their location instantly. They were no longer just defending. They were preparing an attack. Sarah, using her old notes, found 2 other families who had been victimized by Vance's son. One had taken a payout and left the state. The other was still in town, living in fear. Their daughter had been assaulted, then branded a liar. Her father had lost his job at the Vance lumber mill. Jack and Doc paid them a visit. The father, a broken man, tried to shut the door in their faces. "Please, just leave us alone," he pleaded. He'll destroy what little we have left. Jack stood in the doorway. He did not push. He did not threaten. He already has, Jack said softly. He took your daughter's voice. He took your pride. We are here to help you take them back. He told them about Maya. He told them they were not alone anymore. He made no promises of safety, only of a chance at justice. It took an hour. But in the end, the father agreed to talk to Ben Carter. It was a crack in the wall of silence. Meanwhile, Reaper was in his element. He sat in the back of the van, surrounded by screens, the glow reflecting in his glasses. He was a digital shark, swimming through the murky waters of Vance's corporate network. "This guy is sloppy," Reaper muttered, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "He thinks money is the best firewall." He found encrypted files, hidden ledgers, and threatening emails sent to local officials. He was building a case, piece by digital piece. But the smoking gun, the undeniable proof, remained elusive. They were making progress, but it was slow. And Elias Vance was not a patient man. He had been challenged. His power had been questioned. He felt the net tightening, and he decided to do what he always did when cornered. He would escalate. He would use brutal, overwhelming force to crush the problem once and for all. He would make an example of the girl and the old soldier who dared to stand against him. The breaking point came without warning. It was a cold, clear afternoon. Jack had gone into town with Doc for supplies, leaving Reaper at the cabin to monitor the network and Havoc to stand guard over Maya. It was a calculated risk, but they could not remain isolated forever. The attack was swift and professional, far more so than the clumsy attempt with baseball bats. A van, identical to Reaper's, pulled up to the cabin. 4 men in black tactical gear, not construction uniforms, poured out. They used a signal jammer, cutting Reaper off from the outside world. Reaper saw them on his monitors a second before the screens went dead. He shouted a warning to Maya and grabbed his weapon. Havoc met the first man at the door, a blur of teeth and fury. He bought them precious seconds. Disabling one attacker before another struck him with the butt of a rifle. The dog collapsed. Unconscious, they swarmed the cabin. Reaper fought back, a whirlwind of motion in the confined space, but he was outnumbered 4-1. A taser bolt caught him in the back, and he went down, convulsing. Maya ran. She scrambled out a back window, clutching the burner phone Doc had given her. She knew the signal was jammed, but she also knew what else it contained. During a quiet moment, Reaper had shown her how to activate a hidden audio recorder. She fumbled with the button, turning it on just as a hand grabbed her hair, yanking her backward. She fought. She was no longer the terrified girl from the mine. She was a survivor. She clawed at the man's face, her fingernails digging deep into his skin, drawing blood. Her defiance earned her a vicious blow to the head. Her world exploded in a flash of white, then went dark. When Jack and Doc returned, the scene was one of chilling stillness. The door was splintered. Inside, Reaper was just coming to, groaning. Havoc was breathing, but barely. And Maya was gone. Jack knelt beside his dog, his face a mask of stone. He saw the blood on the floor. He saw the signs of the struggle. He looked at Reaper, who was holding his head. "They took her," Reaper rasped. 4 men, pros. They jammed everything. Doc was already working on Havoc, his hands moving with the practiced calm of a combat medic. "He's got a concussion, maybe some broken ribs. He's tough. He'll make it." Jack stood up. The quiet man who sought peace was gone. The cold rage that had simmered beneath the surface now burned with the intensity of a forge. All restraint, all attempts to work within a broken system were incinerated in that fire. He walked to the comm station. Reaper had managed to get a signal back. Jack opened a channel to Ben Carter and Sarah Jenkins. His voice was unnervingly calm. It was the voice he used right before a mission went loud. "He has the girl. The by-the-book approach is over. The rules are gone." He looked at Doc and Reaper. They saw the look in his eyes. They had seen it before. It meant there would be no compromise, no negotiation, only a reckoning. "Reaper," Jack commanded, "find her. I don't care what you have to break into. Burn down his entire digital life. Find her now." To Doc, he said, "Get our gear, all of it." Jack went to his own footlocker, the one he had not opened in years. He pulled out his own black tactical gear, the plates and webbing that felt like a second skin. He checked his rifle, his sidearm, his blades. Each movement was precise, economical, and lethal. He was no longer protecting. He was hunting, and Elias Vance had just become the prey. The hunt began in the digital ether. Reaper, fueled by adrenaline and rage, launched an all-out assault on Vance's empire. He was no longer a quiet hacker looking for a single file. He was a wrecking ball. He crashed corporate servers. He rerouted financial accounts. He tore through firewalls that had cost hundreds of thousands of dollars as if they were tissue paper. And then he found it. Buried in the personal cloud storage of Vance's chief of security, the man Maya had scratched, was a folder of video files. They were from a motion-activated camera deep inside the Sterling mine, a camera Vance used to monitor his secret business. It was his insurance policy. It had just become his death warrant. Reaper downloaded the files. The first one showed Vance's son with another girl weeks ago. The next showed a payoff to Sheriff Brody, right there in the mine. And the last one, time-stamped just an hour ago, showed them dragging an unconscious Maya into a reinforced chamber. It showed Elias Vance himself, overseeing the operation. "Got them," Reaper said, his voice tight. "They took her back to the mine. Vance is there." He paused. "Jack, the video shows a steel door. They're holding her in an old dynamite locker." Jack absorbed the information without expression. "He made a fortress. We'll break it." While Reaper worked, Doc had been preparing. The back of the plumber's van was a mobile armory. He laid out weapons, body armor, and breaching charges, everything they would need. Jack contacted their allies. "Ben, Sarah, Reaper has everything. It's undeniable. It's coming to you now. Once you have it, release it. To everyone. National news, state police, anyone who will listen." "What are you going to do?" Sarah asked, her voice laced with worry. "I'm going to keep my promise," Jack said, and cut the connection. He identified the one man they could trust in local law enforcement, Deputy Miller, the young, honest cop who Brody kept on the night shift. Jack sent him a single encrypted text with a location and a time. "Trust me." The plan was multi-pronged, a storm of chaos and truth, converging on one point. At 8 o'clock that evening, Elias Vance was the guest of honor at a town hall meeting. He was there to accept an award for his generous contributions to the community. He stood at the podium, smiling, the picture of civic virtue. At that exact moment, Sarah Jenkins hit publish on her article. It went live on the Chronicle's website and was simultaneously picked up by a national wire service. The headline was stark: "Local billionaire Elias Vance implicated in kidnapping, corruption scandal." The article contained links to bank statements, incriminating emails, and the sworn affidavits from Ben Carter's clients. At the same time in the town hall, the large projector screen behind Vance, which was supposed to be showing a slideshow of his accomplishments, flickered. The image changed. It was the video from the mine. The hushed crowd saw it all. They saw Vance paying their sheriff. They saw his son with a terrified girl. The audio was clear. The images were damning. Vance stared at the screen, his face draining of all color. His empire was crumbling in front of the very people he had ruled. The final piece of evidence landed like a thunderclap. Ben Carter strode to the front of the room, holding up a phone. "This is a live recording," he announced, his voice ringing with authority. He played the audio from Maya's burner phone, the sound of her abduction, her screams, the voices of her attackers. The public humiliation was absolute. The untouchable tyrant was laid bare. But the real takedown was happening miles away, at the Sterling mine. Jack, Doc, and Reaper moved through the trees like wraiths, their night vision turning the world a ghostly green. They neutralized the 2 guards outside the mine with silent, efficient takedowns. Inside, they found 4 more men guarding the steel door to the dynamite locker. This was not a fight to be won with subtlety. Doc threw 2 flashbang grenades. The tunnel erupted in blinding light and deafening sound. Before the guards could recover, the 3 SEALs were on them. It was not a fight. It was a clinical dismantling. In seconds, it was over. They stood before the steel door. "Breaching," Doc said, placing a shaped charge on the lock mechanism. They took cover. The explosion was a contained, violent roar. The steel door blew inward. Jack was the first one through. Maya was on the floor, bruised and weak but alive. Vance's son and his head of security stood over her, stunned by the explosion. They saw Jack, and for the first time in their privileged lives, they knew true fear. Jack's eyes were not human. They were chips of ice. He moved past them, ignoring them completely, and went straight to Maya. He knelt and gently checked her for injuries. "It's over," he whispered. "You're safe." Doc and Reaper handled the 2 men, subduing them with zip ties. They found the security chief's face was covered in deep, angry scratches. The DNA under Maya's fingernails would be a perfect match. As they led Maya out of the mine, they were met by a convoy of state police cars, their lights flashing, cutting through the night. Deputy Miller stood with them, his face grim but resolute. He had gotten the message. He had made the call. He had trusted them. Back in town, the scene was chaos. Elias Vance tried to flee the town hall, but was met at the door by Miller's state police counterparts. The cuffs snapped onto his wrists under the glare of news cameras. The benevolent king was dethroned. Sheriff Brody was arrested at his desk, trying to shred documents. The simultaneous raids, guided by Reaper's intel, rounded up the rest of Vance's network of enforcers and corrupt officials. The entire corrupt enterprise was decapitated in a single night. The storm had passed. The quiet that followed was not empty, but full of a fragile peace. The trials were swift. The evidence was overwhelming. A digital and physical mountain that left no room for doubt. The videos, the audio recordings, the financial records, and the DNA evidence formed an unbreakable chain. Elias Vance, stripped of his power and wealth, was a small, withered man in the courtroom. He was found guilty on all counts: kidnapping, racketeering, corruption. He received a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. His son and his enforcers received similarly long sentences. Sheriff Brody and the other complicit officials were convicted of corruption and sent away for decades. Justice was not a compromise. It was absolute. The town of Pine Ridge began to heal. With Vance's influence gone, people started to talk. More stories came out. More victims found their voices. The Chronicle, led by Sarah Jenkins, won a national award for its reporting. Ben Carter used the legal precedent to help other communities fight similar corruption. One afternoon, weeks after the verdict, a woman knocked on the door of Jack's cabin. It was the wife of the man whose door Jack had stood in, the father of the other girl who had been silenced. She carried a freshly baked pie. "We never said thank you," she said, tears in her eyes. "We were cowards. You showed us what courage looks like. You gave our daughter her life back." Jack simply nodded and accepted the gift. It was more valuable than any medal. The government, through victim restitution funds, seized all of Vance's assets. A significant portion was awarded to Maya and the other victims. But a special fund was also created to help the community heal. Jack, with Maya's encouragement, put in a proposal. He did not want to leave. He had found something here he thought he had lost forever: a purpose. He used the funds to buy a large plot of land on the edge of town. He started the Havoc Project, a non-profit facility to train service dogs for veterans suffering from trauma. He poured his own silence, his own pain, and his own hard-won peace into the work. He understood the bond between a broken soldier and a loyal dog better than anyone. It was a way to save two lives at once. The final scene was not one of drama or violence, but of profound, earned tranquility. Months had passed. The snows had come and gone, washing the mountains clean. It was a warm spring evening. Jack sat on the porch of his cabin. The air was filled with the scent of pine and damp earth. Havoc lay at his feet, fully recovered, his tail thumping a steady rhythm against the wood planks. He was older, with a slight limp that would never quite go away, a reminder of his quiet bravery. Maya sat beside Jack in a rocking chair, reading a textbook. She was enrolled in online classes, planning to go to college to study law. The bruises on her face were long gone, replaced by a quiet confidence that radiated from her. The terror was gone from her eyes. In its place was strength. They did not speak much. They did not need to. They shared a comfortable silence, the kind that exists between people who have walked through fire together and come out the other side. Jack looked out at the mountains, the last rays of the sun painting the peaks in hues of orange and purple. He had come here seeking to be alone, to escape the ghosts of his past. But in the defense of another, he had found a new family. In the chaos of a righteous war, he had found his peace. He reached down and stroked Havoc's head. The dog looked up at him, his intelligent brown eyes full of unwavering loyalty. The silence was no longer an absence. It was a presence. It was home.